through this book. I think we're going to be finished in less than 2.5 years. Anyway.
So,
I'm waiting to see what I've got after this.
right.
I'm going to do a Bible survey. But my kind of Bible survey means starting in Genesis, in about 20 years' time we'll finish Revelation. What do you think of that then? Might miss Acts.
You're not going to give us any questions on them, are you?
Oh yes.
Only at the end, then.
Yeah, at the end. Yeah.
What, to remember?
After finish Revelation,
chapter 2?
yeah, we'll start in Genesis. But yeah, I've actually done too much material again. Usually, but I'm enjoying doing it. I've only been working on it for a year, and up to chapter 2 in Genesis, would you believe?
Well, it's taken you 3 years to get here.
2.5. June this year will be 2.5. Okay. Acts chapter 23. Paul is rescued from an assassination plot. I'll tell you, Eastenders have got nothing on this, have they?
Right, that's right.
I tell you, Paul before the Sanhedrin, Acts 23, verse 1 to 35. That's his nephew. Kodak, once more leaping into action in the first century, and we'll understand what his nephew does in a minute. Paul was kept a prisoner in the barracks for his own protection. Remember, he almost caused a riot, and they certainly wanted to do bad things to him. Even the Romans wanted to beat him up, and he made it plain to them that he was a Roman, and that kind of changed things. It says, when Paul's sister's son learns of a plot of some of the Jews to call him before the Sanhedrin again, in order to ambush and kill him, he tells Paul. Paul sends the young man to tell the centurion, and Paul was moved at night from Jerusalem down to Caesarea and kept under guard in Herod's palace where he was safer. That's a kind of synopsis of some of the stuff we're going to see, okay? That means a little bit of introduction over here. Anyway, you know what I mean. So here's a genuine picture by Kodak of a Sanhedrin of the first century, of the high priest.
No, that's so he's.
Eh?
No, so he's.
The house, yes, yes.
It shows you how God works, doesn't it? To put a young boy just there to hear what was going on and to let Paul
Right place, the right time.
Yeah, right place at the right time by God.
Yeah,
and he passed the message on.
You're going to see that even as more of that type of thing, it's going to be revealed in this passage. Okay, so 23 verse 1 says, Paul looked straight at the Sanhedrin and said, my brothers, I have fulfilled my duty to God in all good conscience to this day. At this, the high priest Ananias ordered those standing near Paul to strike him on the mouth. And Paul said to him, God will strike you, you whitewashed wall. You sit there to judge me according to the law, yet you yourselves violate the law by commanding that I be struck. That's it, the background to the situation. Conscience is always an interesting thing to think about. A lot of people think that if you're guided by your conscience, you'll be all right. What they don't realise is that conscience is something that you educate. It is something, it's an aspect, I believe, that's given to man by God. Man is a tripart being, just to make a small aside. In Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 17 and onwards, it talks about body, soul and spirit. The implication of that, and there's other passages that Jesus talked about, two aspects. He says, don't worry about those who can kill the body, worry more about those who can kill the soul. And there's other passages also. But the implication is that our body, Paul talks about our body being a temple, a tabernacle, a dwelling place. Basically a vehicle to get you around. If you didn't have legs, you wouldn't get very far. Okay? If you didn't have hands to feed yourself, you wouldn't be eating a lot, unless somebody else did it for you. But so it's a vehicle fit for purpose. We're human beings in a world that requires certain bodily functions, and we've been given a body that's capable to handle that. But the body isn't us. If we lose a leg, or lose an arm, or lose an eye, we're no less a person. Matter of fact, in some cases, it can make us a better person, depending on how we handle it. So sometimes our physical disabilities don't really reflect the real person inside. So the body is a vehicle, a temple to move around. It's what we feed. It does the job, gives us the energy to then do the things we need to do. But there's also the soul is the real you. That is what is. It's not an eternal being, because there's a distinction there back in Matthew chapter 25, verse 46. God talks about everlasting life. and everlasting punishment. God is an eternal being. That meant he had no beginning and no end. But we are more everlasting beings. We have a point in beginning in time, and we'll have a point where we won't end. We will go off into eternity, either with God or without God. So we are everlasting beings. So the soul is that which will go on in eternity. But the spirit aspect, and there's a number of different passages. It's not carelessness. Obviously, the Holy Spirit wrote the Bible, so it's not exactly carelessness. But sometimes the same words are used in different ways in different situations. So sometimes we as human beings are careless how we use these words and don't look at the context. But essentially, the spirit of man is that which God gave us. You remember way back in Genesis, God says He breathed into man, man became a living soul. And there's other passages all the way through the Old Testament that imply that the Spirit is that which God gave us. Ecclesiastes chapter 12 there, talking about death of a person, says the Spirit goes back to God from whence it came. And the implication is that the Spirit is that which God, the human spirit, there's another spirit, it's the Holy Spirit. The human spirit is that which God gives us as humanity in order to recognize spiritual aspects of things. And we can suppress that human spirit, and we can feed it, we can tell it, allow it, the Holy Spirit to work with our spirit to enable us to understand more of what God's intention is for our lives.
I always like to see on the grave something that says "Gone back home."
Gone back home?
Yeah.
Okay. What referring to the spirit or to the soul?
Oh, the soul, the spirit, I don't know what one.
Okay, see, there's things you see. Because, that's an interesting question because, you see, if you're a Mormon believes that all spirits come from outside this world and come into this world, live in us, and then ultimately that will go on and ultimately will be our own gods, rule our own planet somewhere else. So their implication is that the spirit and the soul, which they intermingle to a degree, pre-exists our birth. Okay? I would think more biblically correct that when you're born, that's when you're born. That's when you become a new living soul. Even though you take on a lot of stuff from the genes and stuff from before, it's a new birth for you, and it starts your journey there. You haven't pre-existed in some other planet before you got here. Okay, so the implication when a person goes home, we use it in songs and all sorts of stuff. But we're thinking of the home that, for example, Jesus said to the disciples, the apostles, that he had gone to prepare for us. That's our spiritual home. Paul, in some of his writings, he says we're Christians. He says we're like, in the Roman population, what they did with some of their army people, the proper Roman army who were retiring, they actually made them live in small colonies throughout their slavery, their empire, if you like. And they became a small colony of Rome wherever they were established. Paul uses that terminology. He says, we who become Christians, we have become, if you will, a colony of heaven upon earth. We are spiritual beings. Ephesians chapter 1 says, He's raised us up to live in the heavenly places in Christ Jesus. So, in Christ, we are now new creatures in Christ, and we are a foretaste, some of us not very good, foretaste of heaven upon earth. We are, if you like, what some people can look at and say, wow, heaven, he's going to go to heaven, well, I want to be there. And of course other people look at us and think, if he's going to go to heaven, I don't want to be there, which is sad, it's a shame really, but it's not what it was intended to be. It was meant to be a colony of heaven upon earth. And so in that sense, for a Christian, their ultimate home, when they go home, is ultimately heaven. But in this context of the idea of the kind of makeup of man himself, the spirit that God gives us, if you will, at our birth, is that which helps us to recognize spiritual things, and therefore it's that which ultimately will go back to God, irrespective of us. And if we suppress the spirit will still go back to God, but we will await the judgment and will be sorted out one way or another. But again, oh goodness gracious me, you open one, you answer one question and a whole bunch of other things. Again, if you, when you think about judgment, the judgment that awaits us is something we've already decided. Because if we walk with God now, in this world, then when death comes, we will walk with God in the next. We have made the choice to follow Christ now. Whereas if you walk without Christ in this world, then at death, you've already made the choice of where you're going to go. But justice needs to be seen to be done. And therefore there will be a judgment where God will pronounce guilty and not guilty in the separation from the sheep from the goats. The people are going to be with God for eternity and people who are going to be separated from God for eternity. So there's a whole bunch of stuff involved in that. So anyway, so when some people talk about the conscience, they confuse the conscience with the spirit. But having said that, it is something, it's an awareness from God that we can suppress and we can educate in a way. Okay? So Paul says, I've lived in good conscience up to now. Well, if he lived in good conscience up to now, what was happening when he was standing watching Stephen being killed? What was happening when he was dragging the Christians off to be tried and persecuted and killed? You know? Well, he did live in good conscience even under that, because he lived as a good Jew. He thought he was doing what God wanted to do. It wasn't until last week when we saw when he talks about his life story, on Damascus Road, God says, hey, or Jesus said, hey, what are you doing? You're not doing what's right. You may think you've been doing God's will up to this point, but I'm telling you, you haven't been. You need to change from now. But up until that point, even though in the text that I said last week, there were some things that were pricking his conscience, and Jesus uses that terminology, like something where, digging every now and again, thinking, the way these people are dying is just not right. These people, we're killing these people. They're living better than we are. Their faith is stronger than some of our faith. So little things were getting to Paul in his life, which were pricking his conscience. But overall, he's able to say, I did what I thought was right. Even though, looking in hindsight, that part of my life, I was wrong. And the thing is, some people think, well, I'm always living according to my conscience. But if you were brought up as a gypsy, for example, as far as a gypsy is concerned, if you steal from a fellow gypsy, you're in bad trouble. I mean, you are in bad trouble. But anybody who's a non-gypsy is fair game. You're encouraged to steal from them because that's your way of life. Okay? So, if you have been brought up in that environment, it's not going to prick your conscience. It's not going to go against your conscience if you nick the tyres out of the back of some poor old guy's car, or if you do this or that the next thing, because that's all you know. That's what your parents have told you to do. That's what your fellow peers, that's acceptable with them. And so you have no conscience about that until somebody stops you and says, what are you doing? Well, I'm only doing what I know to be the normal way of life. And they say, but that's not right. And they educate them. And suddenly they realise that's maybe not the right way to live. I've used this illustration practically loads of times. You get sick of it, okay? When I was younger, my wife and I were walking through Woolworths, just carry on the story. My wife was walking through Woolworths car park, and it was a Mini. And it was popular at that time to have these stickers on the back of the car. It had a sticker, if you feel like it, do it. And I said to my wife, I feel like taking a knife and puncturing all these tyres. And then I'll stand here waiting with a knife in my hand and wait for it to come back. And then when he comes up to me and says, what are you doing in my car? I'll be able to say, well, I felt like it, so I did it. He would say, excellent. I live by that. Would you do that? He would go berserk with me. Because that is something that sounds good as a way to live, but in reality, you want it as a license to do what you want to other people, but you certainly don't want them to do the same back to you. If you steal somebody's telly, and you're sitting watching it one night, and all of a sudden somebody comes in and steals it back, you think, hey, get off, you stole my telly, that's terrible. But you stole it in the first place. Yeah, but that's different. See, we've got all this type of stuff going on. So our conscience is something that needs to be educated. And that's what the Word of God, that's what God, really, through His Word, wants to help us to do. To understand it. He uses a funny kind of word in the Scriptures. It talks about the word discernment. To be able to discern the difference, what is right and what is wrong. What is right as far as God's concerned, and what is wrong as far as God's concerned. And therefore, as we are educated in our conscience, then we respond to that in a godly manner. Okay? So, part of being either accuses us of doing wrong or excuses us as we've done things acceptable, depending on how educated it is and how much we know of the Scriptures. Paul had Christians killed and imprisoned. At that point in his life, he didn't think that was wrong. But looking back, he realizes, I'm horrified. Matter of fact, maybe one of the things that drove him on to be such a strong Christian was the knowledge of what he'd done to Christians in his earlier life. And that tells us conscience is not an error-free guide to make decisions by. So it's educated. So in addition, the conscience, the conscience can be rejected. We can know what the conscience says. We ought not to do this. We ought not to be here. Maybe you hear a little voice on your shoulder saying, "Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't." But we do it anyway. Conscience saying, "We know this is wrong, but we still do it." And other times, you can get the situation where you've done something wrong so many times, it means nothing to you. And so, zero to the hot iron, you see the calves being branded, and that piece of skin no longer feels stuff. It's just, it's immune to pain. It's been sealed to the hot iron. And sometimes that's what we do with our conscience. We've done something so often, we get so used to doing it, and if somebody comes along and says, that's wrong, we say, so what? I don't care. So we've sealed our conscience to the hot iron. These passages refer to stuff like that, okay? So our conscience needs to be educated. It isn't a good guide in and of itself. It's only a good guide as well as it's being taught by the ultimate guide, which is God, through His Word. As conscience is a wonderful gift from God, however, it must be educated by the Word of God in order for it to be effective as God intended, okay? To be helpful to us. Somebody said that, pain's a bad thing. Well, it's a bad thing in lots of circumstances and situations, but pain gets you out of a lot of trouble. If you were a leper and you're frying sausage and eggs, and by accident you're frying an extra sausage, i.e. your finger, you wouldn't know because you don't feel pain. See, you could be hurting yourself, damaging yourself.
It tastes a bit funny, but
it might do. This is true. So, that's the kind of situation we get ourselves into. Pain can be a good thing, and it's like a conscience. It needs to be educated. It needs to be a live thing. It needs to be something that's we're aware of and want to work on to help to educate and make right, so that we don't accidentally burn ourselves and damage ourselves when we ought not to. Picture of the Old Testament priest there. I'll come back to that in Leviticus. Okay, those who were standing near Paul said, "You dare to insult God's high priest?" Paul replied, "Brothers, I didn't realize he was high priest, for it is written, do not speak evil about the rule of your people." The Jewish priests, all descendants of Aaron, changed positions each year. And it's logical to assume that Paul is telling the truth. He didn't know who was the high priest that year. He had been up in front of high priests before, and this was a different one, so he didn't know who was the high priest that year. There's a number of people, a number of different commentaries talk about different things. He said, well, he didn't know because he's got bad eyes. Some people say he's got a thorn in the flesh. And the thorn in the flesh might be his eyesight. So he didn't know because you're looking at the guy and didn't recognize him. Okay, I've done something else in between. All right, I'll come back to that in a sec. The Sanhedrin come into being in the desert to assist Moses and the tribal leaders make policy decisions and adjudicate the more difficult questions of law and justice. Now, I put that in there. That's a bit controversial because the Sanhedrin, as the Jews knew it in the time of the Jews, is more seen to be from the time of the Greek, like Babylonian captivity, coming back from the synagogue worship and stuff like that. They really came into their own in this New Testament era. But they have been identified in some of the writings with some of the things that happened a long time ago. And to just complicate things or help you in that, okay, I've done something slightly different. Would you believe I've done something slightly different? If I can remember what it is. If I haven't got rid of it. Yeah, there we go. Alright, now I don't know how big that is, because you can see it there. Okay? This is an International Standard Bible Encyclopedia, and it talks about the name synagogue. A gathering place was a name applied to the Jewish place of worship in later Judaism and in and outside Palestine. I won't bother with the Greek terminology. A place of prayer was probably more of a nature of an enclosure marking off the sacred spots and profane foot than a roofed building like a synagogue. Most probably also meant a synagogue. In the Mishnah we find a synagogue in the Targums, in the Talmud, or simply in the Kenisha. The oldest Christian meeting places were modelled on the pattern of the synagogues, and the Christian Palestinian Aramaic, the word Kenisha, is used for the Christian church. Compare, okay, forget that. The origin, the synagogue was in the time of the Lord one of the most important religious institutions of the Jews, is clear from the fact that it was thought to have been instituted by Moses. Philo thought that in that book we had at Targum. It must have come into being during the Babylonian exile. That's the biggest, most people think about that. At the time, the more devout Jews, far from the native land, having no sanctuary or altar, no doubt felt drawn from time to time, especially on Sabbath and feast days, to gather around those who were especially pious and God-fearing in order to listen to the Word of God and engage in some kind of worship. We move that up to the top if I can. If you will. Oh, look at the cracker there, eh? What's happened there? Oh, let me use the right. Again. Okay. Oops. Origin. Okay. That was a good idea. It went wrong, didn't it? All right. Spelling synagogue. Okay. That's a modern one. Site. Where I put the older bit. Reference back to. That's the architectural style. You see Alexandria at the time of the Idisham. He's a famous guy that describes it. And the furniture of the synagogue. That's going into the thing. Okay, there's some passages up there I thought would be helpful, but obviously I messed it up. Let's get back to where I was. This Numbers 1, Moses had to make some real... He was, up to this point in time, he was making all the decisions. And it was just too much. All the people were coming up to him and saying all sorts of stuff, asking him all sorts of questions. He was spending so much time answering these questions, he wasn't getting any work done. So he chose a bunch of big guys, usually about 70, to actually be the people that you could come to and listen and ask questions and get good, decent answers from. And then there's a period in Jewish history when it seemed to disappear, it wasn't mentioned too much, and then it comes back in again. And they reckon that the modern synagogue of Jesus' time was based around that idea. And it wasn't a synagogue, it was the Sanhedrin. They were the 70, based upon this principle way back in Numbers. Okay, so you do your own reading about that. Okay, next question. Yes, it was only the body that the only body that theoretically had the power to discipline kings and rulers of the nation. There's a lot of different people written different stuff. And some piece together some things and some piece together other bits, but overall picture seems to be quite a powerful body that had a lot of reasonable amount of power. Under the Romans, it was limited in its power and restricted making judgments concerning matters related to religion and culture of the Jewish nation. That would be again a Kodak as represented. There was a Senate of the Jews who was based upon the Council of 70 appointed by Moses. It was composed of the high priest, the other senior priests, and leading scribes and rabbis. It also included many of the rich and powerful men among the Jews of the time. Many positions in the Sanhedrin were hereditary. It could exact the death penalty on Jewish lawbreakers, but it could not crucify.
It's a bit like a religious government, isn't it?
Yeah, you find a lot of religions when they stick with the Old Testament concept and translate it into New Testament times, they end up with a very similar situation. For example, at the Roman Catholic Church, the Pope, then under him you've got archbishops, 70, and they're the kind of lawbreakers. Okay, that's sort of done. The lawmakers and help the Pope do his business type of thing, and you can get access to them a lot easier than you can access to the top guy. The Mormons, No, not the Mormons, Jehovah's Witnesses. The funny thing about the Jehovah's Witnesses, they're really down in the Roman Catholic Church. And yet their structure is exactly the same. For the first 3 leaders that they had, from the time it started in about 1873, roughly, the first 3 leaders through to about 19, 20, 25, something like that, these guys were the number 1. And under those guys, there was 70. Exactly the same structure. It was only later that they lost the number 1, and you know how we know how to get a hold of them now, but basically they would keep secret who was in control. So you couldn't get the names of who was the 70 for a long time, and who was now the top dog. And even today, I don't think they've got a top dog that we can refer to as, he's the head. They've hidden themselves in this top group. But if you know where to look, you can get the names of them. Anyway, so you can see how in different religious structures today we have a similar thing. The Church of Scotland, with their elders and the presbytery in Scotland, is a similar idea. You've got the power structure at the top, and it's all a throwback to the Old Testament system, mainly because they've misunderstood the New Testament system. But in trying to keep this power element, where somebody at the top can have control over the rest of the people, they've got these power structures in place. And it's to kind of keep that going. And it's interesting how in the Jewish time it was a hereditary thing. In some of the religious groups it's not a hereditary thing, but in some it's quite a fixed system that they have to pass on from one to the other. Oh, there's a whitewashed wall. Well, when I was a kid we used to do those. You know, our byres, our barns and stuff, we used to use whitewash. Rubbish. It smelled horrible. That way it hides all the junk, see. Whitewashed wall. In fact, that used to be my punishment regularly. Anyway, well, not punishment, of course, no punishment. Ananias didn't want to hear my privilege. He didn't want to hear that Paul could replace Moses with Christ in good conscience. He ordered Paul to be struck in the mouth for saying such a thing. So this guy, obviously, he doesn't like the idea of Christ anyway, and here's Paul almost in this man's mind, he's elevating Christ above Moses. So you can imagine he's who do you think you are, you know, and he acts in an impetuous manner, but he's in a legal manner. That's what Paul's going to say. So Paul responds back to them and says, curse the name of God. He added a name called Ananias, you whitewashed wall. Yeah, we'll see more about that in a second. Okay, if Ananias had been an inferior member of the court, the curse and insulting name would not have broken the law. But when Paul learned that he, as high priest, that he was a ruler of the people, he realized that he was breaking the law under the Jewish law. So therefore he apologized. Very good, very good. Breaking the law, see, it's connected with the law. The Jewish law forbade speaking evil of the ruler of the people. Name-calling and insults to the ruler of the people were serious offences for which the offender could be beaten with 40 lashes. And you can imagine if you are the ruler, you'd be quite happy to make sure that happened, you know, just to keep them under control. If God told the people not to speak evil of the rulers, would it not be a good thing if our citizens showed some respect and used the name of our leaders with, you know, some decorum? Mrs. Thatcher, nice person. Mr. Bragg, Mr. Blair, Mr. Bragg, you know. Anyway, should more say, assuming assuming they earn our respect, okay? Our laws are soft on those who malign public figures, whereas libel and slander of private individuals can bring a heavy financial penalty in a court of law, which again is many people. Okay, hypocrite. The Jewish law also said a man should not be struck or beaten unless he is found guilty of a crime in the court of law. And this was what Paul was getting to him at. He says, basically, I'm innocent. I'm in your court of law, and you haven't me been struck. So as a reaction to that, he then said, you know, you're breaking the law, you whitewashed wall, you hypocrite, basically, he said. Ananias was a whitewashed wall, in other words, a hypocrite, because he pretended to be following the law in his judgment about Paul, but he himself broke it when he had Paul, an innocent man, struck. Paul knew and predicted that he would get his just deserts, which is interesting. Now, he didn't get a cheese flan, as his just deserts. Okay? Woe to, and this is Jesus speaking. He says, "Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You are like whitewashed tombs, which look beautiful on the outside, but the inside are full of dead men's bones and everything unclean. On the outside, you appear to people as righteous, but in the inside, you are full of hypocrisy and wickedness." Okay? So that's just about a challenge for us today, as it is for them back then. Okay? This is a picture, an artist's representation of the Jewish historian Josephus. He wrote a lot of stuff for the Romans, to be fair, and some of the Jews saw him as a traitor. But with a lot of his writings, they're quite helpful because they describe a lot of stuff of his day. Another famous guy is Idisham. He does a lot of good stuff with the temple and stuff. Fine-looking man.
Yes,
Obviously,
he is.
somebody's hit him on the head again, as somebody implied earlier. Paul's prediction that God would smite Ananias came true. According to Josephus, the Jewish historian, who was a witness of these things, he said, Ananias was slain with Hezekiah his brother during the agitation of the troubles that occurred in Jerusalem when the robbers, or Sicarii, under the leader Manahem, had taken possession of the city. That's important in a second. You'll see why. He attempted to oh, that's a bit slow, that one. I meant to speed that one up. He attempted to conceal himself in an aqueduct that was drawn forth and killed. See Josephus' Jewish Wars, Book 2, Chapter 17, Section 8, from Barnes' Notes. Okay, it's all good. Thus, Paul's prediction was fulfilled. Okay, this is actually the wrong place. But earlier on we talked about why didn't he recognize that the guy was a high priest? Well, probably because he didn't know who was high priest that year. But some people in their commentaries say, he didn't recognize him as a high priest because he couldn't see him. Because Paul, in his thorn of flesh, it's assumed he had a problem with his eyes. And therefore, it's interesting also in one of the passages it says, you happily took me in despite how I looked. So it must have been something that made, if it was an eye problem, it must have been something that made his face horrific. And yet, despite what he looked like, they took him in as a brother and looked after him and stuff like that. Okay, so it's interesting. So keep from nobody knows what Paul's thorn in the flesh is. It's all supposition. But you just take different bits from different places. There's another passage that says, when he signs the end of his letter, he says, "Look with what big letters I write." Okay, because he couldn't see to write the small ones.
Probably had cataracts.
Could have done. Don't know. Nobody knows.
Also seen something about if you put your eyes out, you would.
Dude, they give them to me. Yeah, so really interesting thing. Nobody, when we see him, we'll ask him, "What was probably your eyes?" Was it your eyes? Could have been anything. It says, "Even though my illness was a trial to you, you did not treat me with contempt or scorn." See, something physical, something visual that they were able to see. If you could have done so, you would have torn your eyes and given them to me. You quoted that perfectly, John. Excellent. Good man. You didn't know it was over there, didn't you? Okay. Anyway, nice. I quoted that the other. I want to see what lies that's what I write. I started doing my own hand, all right? It's all good. All right, so shooting through here. Whoops. Almost pressed 2 minutes. Paul, knowing that some of them were Sadducees and others Pharisees. Now, at this point, he's in a bit of trouble. He's abused the high priest by calling him something he shouldn't have called him, and he recognised that and apologises for that. So he knows he's dug a hole for himself, and this judge, this court, this situation he's in is not going to be very friendly. He's already upset them, they don't like him, and there's nothing he's going to say that's going to make any difference, okay, at this point, to them. But he notices that some of them were Sadducees, and the others were Pharisees. Now the Sadducees were sad, you see, because they didn't believe in the resurrection. But the Pharisees did. Okay? So he says, "My brothers, I'm a Pharisee, the son of a Pharisee. I stand on trial because of my hope in the resurrection of the dead." When he said this, a dispute arose between the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and the assembly was divided. The Sadducees say there is no resurrection, and there are neither angels nor spirits, but the Pharisees acknowledge them all. Okay? So you can imagine it's like watching the court proceedings in Russia, where they punch living daylights out of each other. When so that's taking the pressure off them. They're busy fighting among themselves, and he's done that deliberately. Oh, it's a crime scene there. I'd draw that. You know, okay. I think Paul saw that the Inquisition was going unfavourably for him, so he injected the controversial bone of contention about the resurrection to divide the Sadducees and Sanhedrin and bring him to an indecisive standstill. This effectively forced an end to the deliberations. Paul later admitted he had used this disingenuous, that's a good one, isn't it, trick to short-circuit the investigation and get out of a dangerous situation. These people were powerful and they just stood on their toes, and anything could have happened. They could easily have been taken out and stoned. But he managed to, by getting to fight among themselves, divide and conquer. Okay, it worked beautifully. And so here he is. He's a bit like David. Apostle Paul agreed to Roman soldiers. There was a great uproar, and some of the teachers of the law who were Pharisees stood up and argued vigorously. We find nothing wrong with this man, they said. What if a spirit or an angel has spoken to him? Obviously referring back to his Damascus Road experience. The dispute became so violent that the commander was afraid Paul would be torn to pieces by them. He ordered the troops to go down and take him away from him and by force and bring him into barracks. You could nothing like this in Coronation Street, are you?
No.
Eh? I'll tell you. What were the Pharisees likely referring to when they talk about Paul seeing a spirit? I've just mentioned that, so I won't bother. About news I came near, salt, okay, right. Alright, this is a model of the barracks of Artonia fortress. All again rescued from the murderous intentions of the Jews. He will be kept in the barracks until the commander can find a resolution to his case. But here is a well-planned plot afoot against Paul's life. His enemies planned to call him before the council once more, and then to ambush him and kill him as he's on his way there. You see? The plot thickens. There's nothing worse than a thick plot. Paul's nephew gets word of the plot and comes to the barracks to warn him. Dun, 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 dun. Okay? And in steps, the following night, the Lord stood near to Paul and said, take courage. As you have testified about me in Jerusalem, so you must also testify in Rome. Okay? Have a beer. You've got to Rome.
Courage is good for you.
Take courage. Okay. This does that God, through his foreknowledge, knows that what is happening is setting things up for Paul to be carried safely to Rome. Okay, Paul will be protected by the resources of the greatest empire on earth. You have one man against the mob, and suddenly the Roman Empire steps in and says, we'll look after you, lad. We'll look after you. Alright? And he's deliberately writing a letter, Codex strikes again. Paul feels safe in Roman army barracks, unaware of the Jews' conspiracy to lure him out to assassinate him. 23:12 says, the next morning the Jews formed a conspiracy and bound themselves on oath not to eat or drink anything, drink if they had killed Paul. More than 40 men were involved in this plot. They went to the chief priest and elders and says, we have taken a solemn vow not to eat anything until we have killed Paul. Now then, you and the Sanhedrin petition the commander, bring him before you on the pretext of wanting more accurate information about his case. We are ready to kill him before he gets there. Dun, 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 dun. Okay? In steps a wee lad. When his son and Paul's sister heard of this plot, he went into the barracks and told Paul. Paul called one of the centurions and said, take this young man to the commander. He's something to tell him, so he took him to the commander. There he is. Now, he's pictured often and spoken about often as a little lad, but actually, as you're going to see later, I don't think that's the case. I think he's a bit older than that. The centurion said, Paul, the prisoner, sent for me and asked me to bring this young man to you because he has something to tell you. The commander took the young man by the hand, drew him aside, and asked, what is it you want me to tell me? Dun, 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 dun. The Jews have agreed to ask you to bring Paul before the Sanhedrin tomorrow on the pretext of wanting more accurate information about him. Don't give in to them, because more than 40 of them are waiting in ambush for him. They have taken an oath not to eat and drink until they have killed him. They are ready now, waiting for your consent to their request. Oh, a camel on the job, okay. Paul's sister's son is usually depicted as a small boy, but judging from the language he uses as he explains the plot and gives his advice to the commander, it's obvious he's probably an older teen or a young adult. He's called a young man in the story. Though born in Tarsus, Cilicia, Paul was raised and educated in Jerusalem. He might have had other relatives there besides his sister and their family. As fine, upstanding young men. I'm just thinking, it's such a close end, and maybe, okay. The commander dismissed the young man and cautioned him, don't tell anybody they have reported this to me. And verse 23, calls two of his centurions, so get ready a detachment of 200 soldiers, 70 horsemen, 200 spearmen, go to Caesarea at 9 tonight. Provide mounts for Paul so they may be taken safely to the governor Felix. Okay, the plan, the counter plot is in action. And the Romans rush off to do their will. That's quite a large force. The detachment sent with Paul to escort him to Caesarea was a formidable force of 470 men. This commander was taking no chances because the Jews had been known to riot in times past and all sorts of things happened. So he's not taking any chances this time. Probably many Jews who would have helped the fort here had bound themselves with the oath not to eat and drink or they kill Paul. The clandestine mission undertaken in the dead of night thwarted the plot. Several horses were taken with Paul so he could change mounts when the one he was riding got too tired. That's him with his quill. That's not a quillet. He wrote a letter as follows. Claudius Lysias, this is the commander, to His Excellency Governor Felix, greetings. This man was seized by the Jews and they were about to kill him. But I came with my troops and rescued him, for I had learned he's a Roman citizen. I wanted to know why they were accusing him, so I brought him to the Sanhedrin. That's funny. That's a different story. Where's the young lad in the story? I heard about it. I did something about it. I got him out of it. Okay? So he's making himself out to be a little bit better than he was. And then he goes and struts off there to his business. Okay. I got the impression that Luke saw and copied this letter. The commander Claudius Lysias spun his account to put his actions in the best light as regards to him. The story about how and when he learned that Paul was a Roman citizen was a slight manipulation of the truth, to put it charitably. He probably hadn't yet ordered Paul's accusers to present a case before the governor, but he planned to do that as soon as Paul was safely out at Caesarea. 29:30 says, I found that the accusation had to do with the questions about the law, but there was no charge against him that he deserved death or imprisonment. When I was informed of a plot to be carried out against him, I sent him to you at once. I also ordered his accusers to present to you their case against him. And then he travels off to Caesarea. Soldiers carried out their orders, took Paul with them during the night and brought him as far as Antipatris. The next day they let the cavalry go on with him while they returned to the barracks. When the cavalry arrived in Caesarea, they delivered the letter to the governor and handed Paul over to him. And there he is, continuing as Antipatris, and there's the end of the journey. Why send the cavalry on and the other soldiers back? Halfway over, probably safe enough now. Peace of Palace. The infantry went with the cavalry as far as Antipatris. They stopped there until morning, probably sleeping a few hours. This is about half of the 70 miles to Caesarea. Next morning, the infantry returned to Jerusalem, and the cavalry take Paul and the rest of the way to Caesarea. By the end of the second day, I think Paul was safely settled in Herod's palace, and so it shouldn't be a problem. Herod had many palaces. This one was in the Roman capital of Palestine. Thinking about what's happening, handing over the letter and sorting things out. The governor read the letter and asked what province he was from. Landing was from Cilicia. He said, I will hear your case when your accusers get here. Then he ordered that Paul be kept under guard in Herod's palace. There's the remains of some of the building in Caesarea. Yeah, I'll just give you this. It's only, I've still got 2 minutes, sorry if you like. Do you think Paul will be safe in Herod's palace? Next week, follow the story. The rich and powerful Jews in Jerusalem had a lot of influence with the Roman rulers. Remember that what Pilate did when they demanded that Jesus be crucified? But can Paul demand a particular right as a Roman citizen that will ensure his protection on the trip to Rome? Oh goodness. God did not promise. What's this all about? As your days, so shall your strength be. I will never leave you nor forsake you. So God's promises, okay? We can misunderstand. Oh, goodness, it's raining. What happened to it? Oh, you better have an umbrella with you on your way home.
That getting there.
Yes, God did not promise sunshine without rain. Skies forever blue. pleasure without pain. But he has promised strength for every day, light for the darkness, to show you the way. When the lightnings flash and the thunders roll, he'll send the rainbow and peace for your soul. Rainbow and peace. He will go with you and not leave your side if you will trust him and in him abide. Dun, 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 dun.
Oh.
Ah. Okay?